Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Ball-Cabbage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Thursday. And I got a question from somebody who watched the fT3, fT4 Thyroid Thursday video. We talked about the ratio of fT3 to fT4, so I'm going to follow up with that with this question. The person asked if her TSH, T4, T3 are all normal, she's not on meds, but the fT3 to fT4 ratio is off, what does it mean? Okay. Keep in mind, fT3 to fT4 ratio, when the range I'm giving you at 0.31 to 0.34 is based on the literature, and it's based on having the same units. When you, especially if you're in the US, you may not have your units in picomoles per liter. So you need to convert them using an online calculator into picomoles per liter. Okay, and that's how you get this ratio. If you just take your fT3 and fT4 and they're not in those same units, then the ratio is going to be off, and you can't use my range. You'd have to use whatever range somebody else establishes. So if typically, in general, if we take a look at the fT3 to fT4 ratio is less than 0.31, we think about reduced peripheral conversion. We think there might be some type of cell stress. It's inflammatory, thyroid allostatic state going on where the body's actively decreasing the conversion of T4 to T3. And we might consider that maybe this is a person who is on too much medication, and so there's too much T4 in circulation, so the body is decreasing deiodinase 2, decreasing the conversion. The other thing we might be thinking about is if the ratio is greater than 0.34, this is a person who might need more thyroid hormone. They thought there's just not enough T4 potentially getting to the cells and tissues and getting converted into T3. And so the ratio will be higher. Now, could somebody like her have normal TSH, normal T4, normal T3, not be on medication and have a ratio that's off? You could. I mean, you could. And so the issue is, how do we figure out if this is a person who really has a cell stress inflammatory process going on? Is this a person with a glandular condition going on? Is this a person that needs medications, doesn't need medications? Well, one of the first things that I would ask is, what are their signs and symptoms? What's their health history? What's their signs and symptoms? If the person has signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism or mixed symptoms of hypo, then I'm going to be more concerned, and it's going to influence my thought process. I'm also going to ask what was happening, especially if they don't have much in the way of signs and symptoms. What was happening in the days leading up to the blood draw? Because there could be the ratio could be off a little bit because they had an aggressive workout, because they had some type of sleep disruption, because of some type of stress response. So the values could still be within the lab range, possibly within the optimal range, but the ratios be off. But we have to ask these questions, right? What are the signs and symptoms? What's the history? What was happening in the days leading up to the blood draw that may have influenced the ratios? And what do the rest of the lab show? Is there inflammatory processes going on? Are there tissue patterns of hypothyroidism going on? Those would be all the things I'd want to ask the client, and I'd want to maybe look at the rest of their lab panel to see what else was going on. But in general, no meds, TSH, T4, T3, all within the normal, maybe the optimal range. If her ratio was less than 0.31, what would I be thinking, and what could it mean? It could just mean she had a hard workout the day before and there was some decreased conversion of T4 to T3. Maybe there was some sleep disruption. If there's no signs and symptoms, no major issues going on, no other labs to take a look at, and she really felt pretty good, what would I do in this situation? I would have her just redo the thyroid panel and probably look at a more comprehensive panel to see what else is going on. If it comes back, make sure, low stress, good night's sleep, don't do an aggressive workout the day before the blood draw, okay? What she meant by her question was, if that ratio is greater than 0.34, what does that mean? Well, again, I would look at these things. Does she have signs and symptoms? What was happening in the days leading up? What do the rest of the labs show? And if she doesn't have anything besides this thyroid panel, then I would start to be considering that maybe there's the start of maybe a thyroiditis going on, where the values, where the thyroid gland is starting to produce less thyroid hormone. T4 is kind of still in the reference range, and so it still looks like there's enough T4 in circulation, even though we're losing production of the gland. And the T3 and free T3 may be still within the lab reference range, but maybe towards the higher end of the reference range, because the tissues are converting that T4 to T3 as quickly as possible. Keep in mind, we can't just look at the ratio in a vacuum and determine what's going on. So we have to take everything into context. Are there signs and symptoms? What was happening in the days leading up? What medication supplements might they have been taking? What do the rest of the labs show? And oftentimes the easiest thing to do if the person feels and functions really good is just retest a more comprehensive panel, definitely maybe a more comprehensive thyroid panel, and we should be able to get our answers. The question might be, but how could a person have reduced thyroid gland production and still have normal T4 and T3? Just keep in mind that by the time you're officially diagnosed as primary hypothyroidism, TSH is lab high, free T4 is lab low, you've probably lost greater than 90% of the thyroid gland. So if there's thyroiditis going on, yes, there can be sufficient TSH. It could be suppressed into normal range by some type of inflammatory mechanism. There can be enough T4 in the bloodstream. And early on, if there isn't an aggressive, depending on what's going on with that cell stress response, there still might be an upregulation or sufficient conversion of T4 to T3. So it requires some investigation. So for the person who asked the question, hopefully this helps. For everybody else, keep a couple key things here. Always make sure you're using the right units. If it's less than 0.31, you want to think about what might cause the tissues to underconvert. And if it's greater than 0.34, this is commonly a condition where the thyroid gland's not making enough thyroid hormone, maybe you're not on enough medication, and the cells really want more. So either more production from the gland or more medication is needed. Always take in mind that we have to ask about context. What are the signs and symptoms? What was happening in the days leading to the blood draw? What does the rest of the lab show? And what other medications may this person be on that could artificially suppress labs into maybe a lab reference range or what we might consider an optimal range, all right? So if you have any questions, put them below wherever you watch this video, and hopefully this helps. Take care.